This is the introductory video in this cheat engine series, and let's talk a little bit about what this series is about and what the goal of this series is going to be. So the first goal of this series is first and foremost to learn about basic computer architecture from a top-down perspective. So we're going to talk about higher level concepts such as programs, applications, operating systems, and we're going to work our way down to some lower level topics such as data types, virtual memory, threads is something that will probably come up towards the later part of the series. We're going to discuss all these things in the context of Cheat Engine. Cheat Engine is an application that allows us to manipulate memory inside a specific program, application, and or process. They're sort of synonyms, but we'll get to that. And the end all goal of this is to become self-sufficient when using Cheat Engine so that we can employ these methods against the vast majority of games that we come in contact with. So nothing that we will talk about in this series, or very little that we will talk about in this series, is specific to a particular game. Rather, we will talk about general methods that can be employed against most games, and there will be exceptions, as there are with all things, and we will try to cover those exceptions as best we can. As I said before, we're going to take a top-down approach. This is going to be an in-depth series, so we're going to talk about computer science topics that are not necessarily required to use Cheat Engine. But the goal of this series is not just to learn how to use Cheat Engine, not to point and click and manipulate values, but to understand what exactly Cheat Engine is doing, why it's doing it the way that it is doing it, and just to have a better context of understanding. Let's talk a little bit about the presentation. This is a screencast, so as you can see, I haven't really moved the mouse at all yet, which I'll move it a little bit now. This is not live video. You will probably never see my face. And that's more of a function of production values than it is anything else. I have no problem. If someone wants to send me a camera and a webcam, that's fine, but I have gone through a fairly lengthy series of events trying to get a software stack set up that can do this in decent quality, and I feel pretty good about it, and I'm not about to change it now. And plus, there's no, whether you see me or not, it doesn't matter. It's what is most important is what is on the screen. Let's talk a little bit about the software stack that I'm using. I'm using Cam Studio to initially record the audio video. I'm using Audacity to do any audio edits that I have to do. And I'm using Virtual Dub to mux and demux the two. Whenever we launch any games, they will be launched in windowed mode. And the reason is because when you launch games in full screen, it generally bypasses frame buffers and other technical things like that. And if I want to capture games in full screen mode while I'm talking and be able to do different effects and things like that, I have to download some proprietary software or use Fraps or something like that, which has various limitations that don't really fit with what I want to do with the series. So running games in windowed mode is not the end all. It's not that big of a sacrifice, and we will make do. The requirements. The first and foremost requirement is the desire to learn about computers, period. On a general level, on a technical level, and on a deeper level than most people might necessarily, a deeper level than most people might feel compelled to learn about computers. If that's not something that interests you, then you will probably get bored very quickly. Another requirement, obviously, is Cheat Engine. We will make heavy, extreme use of Google and Wikipedia in order to back up some of our theories and concepts that we develop throughout the series. I know that I have a decent grasp on it, but it never hurts when you're trying to demonstrate something or show something to point out and say, look, it's not just me that's saying this. You can go find it over here and see I'm really not crazy. Trust me, this is the way it is. Or don't trust me, but trust the multiple sources and make up your own mind. Another thing is you will require some simple, small, non-AAA titles to work with. We're going to we will work from a top-down approach from the computer architecture standpoint, but from the context of games, we're going to work from a bottom-up approach, which is to say that we will start with small, non-complicated games, and we will work our way up to large, complicated AAA titles. That's not an accident, or it's not an accident of fate. The larger the game, the more complex it is, the more things are going on under the hood, the more resources are used, the larger the RAM usage, the longer it takes to scan, the harder pointer scans are, and the larger the game, the more complex the game, the harder it is to cheat. That's sort of a general rule of thumb. So we will start off simple, and what we will find is that the same methods and techniques that we employ with simple games are applicable to larger games. It's just that, again, the complexities and the resource usage for the AAA games are generally much larger. So you have to be more careful, and if you make a mistake, it's more costly in the length of the time that's consumed when you go back, try to identify your mistake, and then redo any steps after that. But we'll get into that more. Talk about the tone a little bit. It's a somewhat or more formal series, or it will be a formal series, but it doesn't mean that I won't be goofy. It doesn't mean that I'm going to sit here. This is a good example. There's nothing on the screen to really demonstrate what I'm saying. I can move the mouse around, but that's just distracting. So in this sense, there will be some episodes where I'm just talking, and obviously I will pull up Wikipedia pages to make it more interesting. It's just, there's nothing I can really pull up on the screen right now. But it doesn't mean that it's all going to be formal. We'll mess around a little bit. It will be computer science-y at times. At times is maybe an understatement. Certainly in the beginning of the series, as we build up some of the basic concepts that we're going to be using as a foundation for the rest of the series, it'll be much more computer science-y and full of theory than it will be pragmatic or practical knowledge. I have a tendency to swear as well. That doesn't mean that I'm trying to detract from the formal nature or the quasi-formal nature of the series. It just means that that's how I am as a person, and if that's a problem, then just be warned. The target audience is people that are new to Cheat Engine and that have a basic grasp of what goes on a computer. Doesn't mean that they happen to know what a process is or anything about memory or virtual memory or anything like that. Just people who are new to Cheat Engine and computers in general. Also, you have to be someone who enjoys an in-depth explanation of technical topics, because we will be doing a lot of that, and occasionally pedantically so. So I have a tendency to go off on tangents and beat things to death much more than perhaps some people would like. And that's just a function of my personality. And if I had to sort of nutshell that, or pigeonhole it, if you will, I'd say that this is not a point-and-click run-through of Cheat Engine and how to cheat in games. This is a much more in-depth explanation of how to cheat in games and how those cheats function. And when those cheats don't function, you will have some bedrock of knowledge to fall back onto and examine why it's not working, what some of the possibilities are of why it's not working. You'll be able to come up with your own methods of how to fix what's not working. Some games that we might use, we're definitely going to make use of the Cheat Engine tutorial. That's a given. If you are watching this, you probably have Cheat Engine installed, which means you have the Cheat Engine tutorial installed. The sad part is that most people don't use the Cheat Engine tutorial, so we will make it a point to go through that tutorial in this series to varying degrees of efficacy. And the Cheat Engine tutorial does a good job of demonstrating the topics, but it does a poor job of explaining those topics. So we will try to fill in, or at least in my opinion it does, a poor job of explaining those topics. So we will try and do a decent job of filling in some of the blanks and building up some of the infrastructure and knowledge necessary to understand exactly what the Cheat Engine tutorial is trying to tell you. Some possible games that we might use Mountain Blade Warband, Terraria, Crusader Kings 2. They're relatively recent, not so much Warband or Terraria, or even Crusader Kings 2, really. Kind of recent games. Yeah, they have some of them. Resource requirements are a little higher than others. Terraria is not too heavy, but fairly easy to cheat or hack on with Cheat Engine. So it's not an accident I chose those games. It doesn't mean we may not use a different game towards the end of the series. We may not even use any of those games. But at this point in the introduction, I feel like those are 3 games that I own. I own them on Steam. They're relatively cheap in the event you want to purchase them or put them on your wish list or something like that. They're good games to learn on. Talk a little bit about diversions. I have a tendency to go off the beaten path from time to time. Again, it's just a function of my personality. So if we get on a topic where I happen to find it particularly interesting, my personality is such that without even realizing it, I will go off on a tangent, and it'll be 30 minutes before I catch myself in my head and realize, crap, I forgot what I was originally talking about, and now I'm talking about this thing, and I will try to minimize that, but rest assured that we will regularly diverge into a specific topic, specifically a topic that I find interesting, and we'll talk a lot about background on those topics. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be off the beaten path. For example, there will be times where we will discuss technical topics and we will go over them in a general sense so that we have a context within Cheat Engine to understand them. But we're not going to go into every single pedantic detail. And in those events, I will always point you to a reference, whether it's Wikipedia or Google or something like that, to say if you want to discover more about this topic, you can certainly go here and click here and read to your heart's content. Generally, these diversions may not seem immediately relevant, but they will always provide context. I think that's important. Context is, for me, it helps me understand things more than a very dry discussion of the topic. There will, as I indicated earlier, there will be computer science discussions. Some computer sciencey things, if you will forgive that term, that we will discuss. Design patterns, compiling versus interpreted languages. I think those are 2 important things when it comes to using Cheat Engine, especially the compiling versus interpreted. We're getting into the era now of where a lot of games are written in interpreted languages, higher level virtual machines and frameworks like .NET and the cross-platform Mono. These are things that are becoming more and more prevalent, and if you're going to use Cheat Engine against modern games, you have to understand certain concepts about them, such as just-in-time compilation and things like that. And we will get into all this, but it is worth highlighting up front that these are very complicated topics, and they are rooted in computer science, and there's no way to really manipulate and understand them with Cheat Engine unless you understand them in the context of computer science and a general overview in that regard. And so we will get into that much later in the series. We will also get into some practical programming discussions is one way that I might put that. We'll get into data, the different types of data or data types, base numbering systems. These are things that are generally considered programming topics, but nothing. They are programming topics or computer science topics, one might say. But they have relevance when it comes to Cheat Engine because you're operating at such a low level with Cheat Engine that you need to understand these on a functional level in order to use Cheat Engine effectively. And again, these are things that we'll get into more, but it's worth highlighting up front. We'll also talk about operating system concepts such as processes, memory, virtual memory, the difference between the two. Again, do you have to know these things in order to use Cheat Engine in a rudimentary way? Not at all. But to do some of the more advanced things with Cheat Engine, it's necessary to have a good understanding of these things, and we will certainly do our best to provide that during the series. During the series, we'll also develop a technical vernacular, if you will. So we will define what a process is. We will define what a thread is. We will define what virtual memory is. We'll define some design patterns, some data types. These are things that we will develop as the series progresses, and we will not go back post factum to discuss them and define them. So there will be a video where we define, some of what is an application versus a program versus a process. Are they synonyms for each other? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But we will define our understanding of them for the series in a video. And if you're skipping around in the series, it's very possible that you will get lost. So it's just worth noting that we will develop a vernacular during the series and as the series goes on. So hopefully you will pay attention and get accustomed to that and not be wondering, what's the difference between an application and a program, if any. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. And last, I'd say that if you have any comments or any feedback, certainly feel free to post it for any video. I definitely like reading it, whether it's good or bad. If it's great, if you like what you see or you like what you hear, as the case may be, then that's great. And if you don't, then have some constructive criticism. Obviously, if your criticism or your comment is to the effect of "you're an asshole," and that's it, then maybe that's something I won't really take into consideration. But if it's something constructive, then obviously I'll assimilate that feedback. Certainly subscribe if you feel like showing your support. And just a final disclaimer, some of these videos are going to be long and going to be in-depth, as demonstrated by just this introductory video. This is not a 3 to 5 minute burst episode series, where every episode we're going to come on and say, here's how you find a pointer, and then 5 minutes of pointing and clicking, and then, oh, you're an expert, go find pointers. That's not the approach that's not the approach that I am taking in the series. This is going to be a very long series. It's going to be very in-depth by average standards, and that's something that you should be prepared for up front.